Meanwhile, we do have new information about the man accused in the New York and New Jersey bombings over the weekend. As we mentioned, 28-year-old Ahmad Khan Rahami was arrested yesterday after a shootout with police in Linden, New Jersey. And federal law enforcement sources now tell CBS News that they have found writings from Rahami revealing how he may have been radicalized by various terrorist ideologies. Fran Townsend is a former Homeland Security advisor to President George W. Bush, a CBS News senior national security analyst as well. Great to have you back, Fran. Thanks for your time.
Great.
I want to start with what CBS News is being told by U.S. law enforcement officials with regard to this handwritten note that they've recovered, also some of Rahami's writings as well. It would seem he's been a consumer of a number of different radical ideological writings. Al-Qaeda mentioned, Boko Haram as well. It's been described as gibberish, talking about Americans killing Muslims. What to make of the totality of what's been recovered here?
Well, you know, yesterday we were wondering why there was no claim of responsibility from ISIS, and it may be that that's because he wasn't related to ISIS. When they're looking for a connection to an international terror group, these rantings, if you will, the gibberish, may be that he was more sort of directed or inspired by an Al-Qaeda branch, either Al-Qaeda itself, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the Yemen group, which has been very active, or Boko Haram in Nigeria.
He is thus far not cooperating with authorities. How does that change or impact the investigation at this point?
You know, it's interesting, Josh. Look, he has a constitutional right not to have to speak against himself, and so he would have been advised of that when he was taken into custody. But they also would have said to him, look, if there are others out there or there are other devices and you can help us prevent that, one, you will get credit for that cooperation. Two, if anyone's hurt or killed and you didn't help us, you will be charged with complicity in those acts, and you may face the death penalty. And so he would have been advised of sort of all his options.
If we then see what it was he was able and really unable to do, a device detonates in Seaside Park. However, it does there are no casualties that result from it. He plants a bomb here in New York, albeit not on a heavily trafficked street. He plants another one that seemingly is disabled by two men who look to steal the bag in which it was contained. Plants others in Elizabeth, New Jersey. One detonates while it's being disabled. If we then take that information and look at what else we know just in terms of the flight or really lack thereof, he was sleeping in front of a building when he was found. What does this suggest about the level of sophistication and perhaps his participation in a larger network?
Right. Well, look, we believe from everything we know now that he was on a path to radicalization. He's not very competent as a terrorist, right? Most of the devices didn't detonate. That's a common problem. Think back to the Times Square bomber with the car. The detonation device there failed as well. And so the fact that this guy got two things to blow up, but others didn't, shouldn't really surprise us. He's not very competent. He had no escape plan. It doesn't seem as though he wasn't willing to die, because it wasn't as though he strapped one of these bombs or stayed with it to make sure it detonated. Of course, if he'd stayed with it, it would have been more assured of the detonation. So he was not particularly either committed or competent, is what we know.
Perhaps the most troubling aspect of this then remains the international travels that he took with regard to Afghanistan and Pakistan, specifically the time he spent in Quetta, also a bit in Karachi. I know to you, again, that suggests perhaps not so much radicalization by the Islamic State, but it speaks to something I know many in the intelligence and security communities are worried about, the resurgence of Al-Qaeda.
My big concern, Josh, is that as we go forward, that there'll be this not only resurgence of Al-Qaeda, but this competition for attention, recruits for money between Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. And the United States winds up getting caught in that crossfire, if you will, because these guys will both target the United States. They both look for primacy. And as we see the resurgence of the Taliban and therefore Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and the federally administrated tribal areas of Pakistan, that remains a real possibility.
I'm going to get you out of here on this one. Ultimately, what did you make of the police work here?
Phenomenal, right? You take a single fingerprint off the cell phone that's recovered on the unexploded device in Chelsea. They run down who that cell phone is registered to. It leads directly back to the Rahami family. They have an address. The public cooperates. They put the public alert out with the photograph. I mean, it's really a textbook example of how you deal with it once an event's happened. I think the real question now will be, were there signs and things that should have happened before it to prevent it? Should his travel have set off flags? Should the radicalization, the growing the beard, his increasing... Because
he was not on any watch list.
That's right, and that's going to be a concern after the fact when we go back and look at this. Should he have been on law enforcement's screen earlier?
Okay, I lied. I'm going to get you out of here on this one. So much was made yesterday. We discussed it at times. So much has been made in weeks and months and really years past about the idea of the lone wolf attack and how do we stop the lone wolf attack in a country of over 300 million people with free access to the internet. Can't we just, is wondering how do we stop it maybe a waste of time?
No, because each time there's one of these individual cases, what we begin to discover is there are common themes, right? So this individual traveled to an area of national security concern on multiple times. When he came back, we now know from interviews and people who knew him, he grew a beard. He was increasingly anti-American. We know from social media posts, at least of his brother, that there were radical Islamic extremist sympathies, at least in the family. And so what you're looking for are data points in common that will lead you to understand, what am I looking for? How do I identify the needle in the haystack? And so no, I think that we will continue to say, how can I identify these earlier so I can prevent them?
Fran Townsend, as always, insight appreciated.
Thank you.